Hi, I'm Mark Sumner, CEO and founder of Robertson Sumner. Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast, where we will share learnings, best practices and failures with some of the biggest names in the IT industry.
Hello there, it's Mark Reddy from the Channel Chat podcast. Today I'm actually joined by Mark Williams from LA Micro Group. How are you, Mark?
I'm all good, thank you.
Good. So, Mark, you're actually our first ex-professional footballer on the podcast. I imagine probably the last as well.
Maybe so.
It'd be good for you to share the listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, it wasn't too long, and didn't quite make the dizzy heights of what was the Premier League. But no, it was good. I had some really fantastic experiences. Very fortunate as well. I mean, Brentford was the kind of biggest team I did play for, and whilst I was there, I had Ray Lewington as one of my managers. Obviously, been the assistant to England.
Yeah.
And Steve Coppell, obviously very well at Reading and managing the Premiership for a sustained period. So some fantastic experiences, worked with some great people, some great memories, and yeah, I can't really complain.
Brilliant. So following your kind of football career, you obviously embarked on a few different ventures before finding yourself in kind of IT sales. It'd be good to understand your kind of perception of the industry before you kind of come in. So,
sure. I think from an IT sort of perspective, I didn't really have too much sort of prior knowledge to what the industry kind of was and kind of how things would kind of work out. And I think even, I've been in the industry for nearly 8 years now, and the changes that have happened just consistently have been phenomenal. But it was, not probably quite what I was expecting, I suppose.
Okay. And how did you land the opportunity at LA Micro? How did that come about?
So a friend of mine knew the MD, and we got introduced, and I actually did a bit of work with him with another business that I had at the time. We got on well. Dave's a great guy, and he actually did offer me a job prior to joining, but I'd already agreed to kind of go to one of your competitors, so I won't drop on the podcast. Which is a recruitment agency, and so it was an opportunity that I said I'd already committed to, so I didn't want to let anyone down there, so I went with that. But that was something that didn't work out for a variety of reasons, and so I gave Dave a call and said, Dave, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. Is that offer still open? We had a beer, as we do with Dave, thrashed it out, and I started working the next week.
Brilliant. Okay, and what was the role you started in when you joined the business?
Essentially, it was new business.
Okay.
There was a little bit of account management because we were a growing business at the time. It was a fantastic opportunity to join LA Micro when I did. We were prior to about 18 months, maybe 2 years before, doing about sort of £2 million. When I joined, we were doing 5. So the company had just really started to kind of take off and expand, and really kind of, I guess it was the footprint for where we are today. So very fortunate from there, but essentially it's a new business role.
Yeah, so joining from being one of the first employees up to what you're at 60 now, it must be incredible. That journey, how it's changed.
No, indeed. I'm not quite sure. I think it was like 10, 11, 12 when I actually came into the group as it is. But yeah, we've got 60 plus now, so very, very different to how it was.
Of course. So imagine there's a lot of listeners that are starting out in their IT sales career, and I think one of the hardest things to gauge or pick up when you initially start in any industry, whether it be kind of IT sales, recruitment, or any other sales role, is building up kind of credibility, because you could be speaking to IT managers or customers that have been in the industry for years, and you're trying to advise them and consult them, and they're probably thinking, who are you to tell me what you're doing? How do you overcome that? Because it's such a difficult thing to do, isn't it?
It is tough, and it's really probably something that, unfortunately, there's not an exact answer to kind of go, right, if you do this, this and this, 100% it's going to work. What I always try and do, and especially, I'm responsible for my team and how we're perceived as a business, and making sure that we do add value to our customers, which is one of our primary objectives. So it is passing on my knowledge to the guys that are working in my team. And it's making sure that when they're talking to customers that, they understand our business, they understand the benefits to what we do, they understand the product. So when they are having those conversations with the customer, maybe they haven't got the database, the sales to kind of back themselves up, but we as a company have. And as long as they buy into us and buy into speaking to the customer and offering that value, generally speaking, it comes across really well. And I think that's just, from my point of view, you got to understand the message that you're giving to your customer. And if you don't, I think that's probably where most people will fall over.
Yeah, of course. When you're more established, you've obviously got your own examples and case studies of where you've had success, but until then you recommend kind of using the businesses and using their platform to sell yourself.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking to a customer and it's your first day on the job, you haven't made a sale, you've joined a business that is turning over 5, 10, 15, 100 million, whatever it might be. They've obviously made sales. So with regards to case studies, get some examples, understand the people that you're going to be talking to, understand who you're targeting and why, understand the benefits of your business. And with all of that, and you have case studies, it's giving people a reason to understand you as an individual, to understand the business. Because if you are trying to win new business in particular, that company isn't using you right now. So why are they going to use you? And a case study is always a fantastic example of the reasons why a company should, come on board and work with you from a supplier point of view. So just use the experience that is within the business already.
Yeah, and they're still people, aren't they? I think people that put their clients on pedestals and make out they're the kind of be-all and end-all, but you should speak to like people, haven't you?
Exactly. I mean, it's. I always remember sort of going back to the football days. Steve Coppell, we played Newcastle, and Bob Robson was the manager, and Shearer was in the team, etc., etc. And it was to a certain degree. Where Brentford is a 12,000 seater stadium, Newcastle's 50,000, whatever it is. I won't tell you exactly what he said, but the basis of it was they're the same as you. There's no difference. Yes, they're Premier League. Yes, we were League One, but it's you versus somebody else on the pitch. And so there's nothing to be afraid of. And when you're talking to customers, they are an individual. These are the same people that will go out for a meal on a Friday night, have a pint with their friends, support a football team, play golf, whatever it is that they're into. And it's just realising that, trying to tap into that where you can, and then express your knowledge about life as well as, say, the business, and build a bit of rapport.
Yeah, of course, and pushing beyond just day-to-day business and actually understanding them as people is just so key, isn't it? We worked for a year or two now. I know you're a football fan, and that's obviously our kind of mutual talking point more often than not, rather than talking about business. So if you can really gauge and understand the people you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, that's going to be beneficial, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think that ultimately is the difference. Yes, when we kind of cut everything away, it is down to potentially a number or a product or a service, whatever it might be. But if you're looking to really long-term develop relationships with people, it is understanding them as a people. Even if it is a business relationship, who are they within the business? Who do they report to? What's their team look like? What does their industry look like? What's the frustrations that they have? And understanding these kind of points, one, you can kind of come across obviously a bit empathetic, but it's actually then understanding, well, what benefit can I offer you? Because that, I think, is a big thing, is where a lot of salespeople miss out on opportunities. It's just that they don't understand what the customer real requirements are, what their frustrations are, and they're not explaining the benefits that the company you work for can offer. And I think that's where it comes to new business, it's particularly tough because you've got gatekeepers and all this sort of thing. But if you can have those good conversations and explain to someone, well, you want to save money. You said that, I can save you money. Surely it's worth us having a conversation about all the other great benefits that we can offer you in addition to what your primary objective is. Yeah,
of course. Okay. And what was your method of new business? Was it kind of pure cold calling when you initially started, or did you have a marketing function, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's the business is evolved quite a lot from when I first started. I mean, the core aspect of what we have always done is still there. But so going, I suppose, back really to what that is. A lot of it is fact finding, as in people's names, businesses, type of products they're looking for, that sort of thing. Understanding what we have, why we're different, what we can offer, and then through conversations, engaging with them and understanding, like I say, what they're actually looking for. what have I got that's going to be a benefit to your business? Because if I have nothing, then really I'm wasting my own time. You're not going to sell to everybody. So if you're trying to sell to everybody, you're basically working way harder than what you need to anyway. So that's the first thing, and that's when it comes down to, let's say, asking the right questions, getting the right information, so you can extract all of that, and then think, well, what am I going to actually sell into this customer? And when you get to there, that's when new business turns into real business and long-term business, and hopefully makes your job a lot easier.
Yeah, I think you've just touched on the real core principles of that new business piece, and I think the message is so diluted down the market around social selling and other parts, but those are the keys to the job. To get those information, without having that information, you're not going to get anywhere. And this kind of big social selling push at the moment, which is brilliant because it's going to differentiate the market and actually get on the phone to these people, but you still need to have those conversations, don't you? Because if you're not...
Yeah, for me, 100%. I hear a lot of people say, cold calling's dead, no one talks on the phone, etc., etc. And to a certain degree, I get that. But you mentioned obviously social marketing and things out there. For putting a message out, for creating awareness, it's fantastic. Ultimately, people, whoever you are, I always try and look at things from me as a consumer. Mm-hmm. If I'm buying a car, if I'm looking for a new jacket, if I'm shoes, iPhone, whatever it might be, what do I want from that? Where's the value coming from? And is that value then weighed up by how much I'm prepared to pay for it? And obviously, if the value is less, then I feel like I've got a deal. If the value is higher, then I feel like I'm being sort of mugged off, really. And I think that's when, particularly when it comes to new business, it's if you've sold the benefits of you as an individual, of your company, that's what's going to get you the sale. The price point, yes, it is, of course, relative. If you're 10,000, someone's 5, you're going to struggle. But if you're in close comparison, it's going to come down to a trust element. And if you haven't been able to convey your message clearly to the customer, that's when you're going to fall over and they're going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, of course. Okay. And you're at the point now where you're obviously bringing on the new business and it's starting to come and you're building up this kind of book of accounts. The next kind of step on that is obviously building and developing those accounts. How did you go about that? Was it managing that kind of personality side between the customer, or is it more of still a fact-finding exercise for you, or how did you find that?
For me, it was kind of sort of 2-3-fold. So prospecting, I think, regardless of how much you're billing, you always need to do, because anything can change, not only within your marketplace but within individuals that you're working with and businesses. So if you're not prospecting and bringing in new customers, that's going to be a problem at some point. It's also, for me, I always try and reevaluate, definitely yearly, maybe even quarterly, depending on what needs looking at, just to make sure, for example, I've got a customer who's, say, billing £10,000 a month. With that, what have they been doing this year compared to last year? Well, actually, they're only billing 5,000. Well, what's the reason for that? Well, I haven't called them in 6 weeks. So, okay, perhaps I'm looking at my phone times. I can see that they're starting to drop down. I can see that my, mailers that I'm sending out to customers and keeping them up to date with the opportunities that we have within the marketplace, that's tailed off as well. And then that tends to be something along those sort of lines that has a direct input into whether your sales are going up or down. Yeah. So it's just really constantly evaluating what you're doing. Don't be comfortable. Having fantastic months, fantastic years, brilliant. Look at what made you successful, and just keep pushing the whole time.
Replicating what you've done.
Just don't stop. I think the moment you sit still, sit back in your chair and think, I've made it, is probably the point when you haven't.
Yeah, of course. I think that's really important, actually, stepping back. It's so easy to just build a preconception in your head that account's always going to spend or everything's fine with that. And I always remember an MD that said to me, he said, if you're not buying your customer a glass of wine or lunch, someone else is. And it might not be quite as far as that, but you still need to keep them engaged and you can't get...
Well, it's a great point. So I'm always speaking to my guys and, trying to get them to engage, trying to speak to new people and basically bring on business that we're not dealing with at the moment when we know people will be buying the products that we're selling.
Yeah.
So if I'm asking them to do that, how many other companies out there, sales managers, directors, whatever, are asking their people to do exactly the same thing? And how many of those are our customers? So, 100%. If you're not engaging with, let's say, or prospecting as well as engaging with your current customers, there's going to come a point where you're going to fall over, and to then bring it back is a lot harder work.
Yeah, because the customer won't feel valued, and they would have found someone that's actually looking after them again.
Well, yeah, I mean, we all like to feel loved, right?
Yeah.
So if we're not, and I'm not sort of saying to do it in any way that isn't real, but just to give good customer service. And it doesn't have to be always selling. It is understanding the individual that you're working with and just having good conversations with people, so they know that if they need something, they can come to you. And then making sure that when they do, that you deliver as well.
Yeah, of course. Okay. And then after more time in the business, you went into a kind of mentoring role at the same time as well as still billing. Now, last year, I was kind of billing and managing, and I found it the most difficult job I've done, purely because I'd be so committed to the number, and then I think I need to act the team, and I'll be going back the other way, and it's a bit of a seesaw. How did you manage that, and how are you still doing that? You're obviously still doing some really impressive numbers now.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, I was unfortunate, I guess, that having been at the business a while, been part of the growth process and understand how the business works on a daily basis, there's lots of stuff that I can do very quickly that a new starter, for example, would take a long time to do, like quotations and things like that. So from that point of view, that saves time, but ultimately it really comes down to time management, which I think no matter what role you've got, you have to prioritize what you can and can't do, and the things that you're going to commit to and deliver. So if you're going to call a customer back, you call them back. Don't go home at 6 o'clock, whatever, and go, I didn't call. I'll call them tomorrow, because you've committed to making that phone call to the customer. You haven't done it, so it's going to leave a negative impression. Yeah. And that's not to say we don't make mistakes or we don't forget or we get sidetracked, but just whatever you're committing to, just do it. Things that you can't commit to, then make sure you're communicating that correctly. So if a customer wants a quotation, I'm really busy at the moment, I'm out of the office, I can't do it right now. Is it okay if I get it back to you at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock? Yeah. 9 times out of 10, the customer will go, okay. If the customer goes, no, I need it now, then you need to delegate that, so make sure that it gets done. And I think that's where perhaps a lot of people fall over in general, is just not managing themselves. And then it looks like you're then giving poor customer service, which you're not really, but ultimately the customer doesn't know what's going on in your life. If they're sending you an email and they want a quotation, that's all they're really going to care about. Yeah, of course. So you're in the process of kind of managing and growing a team at this point. Was this your first experience of kind of recruiting, obviously your stint in recruitment? First, as for myself, actually recruiting for a team, which I suppose being on this side of the table, what's the other side? It's a bit of an eye opener, for sure. I think it's one of those, I think, sort of weird, sort of almost anomalies where, as a recruiter, you always want to kind of go, yeah, I can fill that role for you. It's fine. It's not a problem. While sort of saying, well, but the market's a bit this, that, and the other. But generally, I think a lot of the time it is hard to fill roles full stop, because as much as there's a piece of paper and it's a CV and it's someone's potential ability, etc. I mean, for us as a company as well, it's very much about fit in the sense that we want to bring people in who we feel are going to be able to be there for long term, feel comfortable and be successful. I do believe that if someone is unhappy in their environment, the chances of them being successful are going to be very, very low. So we want to make sure that with the first day that they come in, they feel supported, they feel like there's a network within the business that they can speak to and use, so they don't ever feel isolated, because we all know new business is tough anyway. And that's where I think the recruitment side has been quite difficult in finding all those wonderful individuals that are probably out there and get them through the front door.
Okay, what do you look for when you interview? Is there any particular kind of things in the interview, or is it more the person you're trying to really uncover and get their kind of motives?
A bit of both. I mean, I think ultimately it's sales. You're in sales, and as much as we can talk about how we want to build relationships, we want to do all these wonderful things, etc., it comes down to one thing, which is how much have you put on the board come the end of the month. And that's the blessing and the curse of being in sales. So from that point of view, it's looking at an individual who is hungry and determined, not necessarily directly from a monetary point of view, but from that success point of view. Like they really want to achieve something, and that's not to say that because you want to achieve something you have to go into sales, of course not. But when I'm looking for someone in my team, it's like, right, I got to believe that what you're saying is going to happen, and that you're prepared to listen, because part of the things that we are trying to do and keep pushing as well is adding value to our customers and making sure that when they've got a question, we're able to answer it, give them the right information quickly. So to do that, they've got to educate themselves, because having probably not sold our products before and not understanding our products, that's a lot of information to take on board. I mean, we typically sell across 3 different generations, as well as multiple vendors, etc. So all that knowledge alone is really tough to take on board. So you've got to be really, really ambitious to want to put as much effort in as you can every single day, because that's what it takes to get through the first 6 months and year, and then
the hardest is
when you become a manager, it gets even harder as well, right?
Exactly that. And I think we touched on it before the podcast, and I think you listened to Mark Powers, which is a brilliant podcast. I'd recommend anyone to go back and listen to. And he mentioned about kind of education and engaging and getting an opportunity that perhaps would be more difficult now than it ever has been, because there's so many, particularly vendors out there, that are looking for graduates or looking for kind of the finished article at like 2022, which is just so surreal. Was education important for you when you go about recruiting, or?
It is. I mean, I try and, for me personally, I try and look at where somebody is on their journey and initially make some sort of assessment from that, in which I think, well, okay, what am I looking at here? What can I see that's going to stand out? Because let's say I want to bring someone on board who's going to be successful, and that's not from a selfish point of view. Well, I suppose it is, but for them, because the time and effort that they're going to have to put in, it's a big commitment. And so from my point of view, I don't want to let them down.
So much to fail, yeah, it'd be completely wrong, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's where I'm looking at the CV and thinking, well, what's this saying here? What's this saying here? What does that really mean? That's why I tend to push back a lot on recruiters as well, because it's not being difficult. It's just saying, well, look, I can see they've done some business development. Fantastic. What does that really mean? Because business development, which is someone sent an email and can you ring them up? For me, that's not business development. That's just customer service. And, we are looking for sales reps. And that's what I look for. It's someone who can go to that next level, and not just be a customer service rep. And so it's nothing to say there's wrong being customer service rep. It's just each role needs to fulfill what the requirement is. And if you're going to be in sales, that drive, that willingness, that ability to listen, absorb information, I mean, ultimately that's what you're going to trade on. And if you're not prepared to invest in that and invest in yourself, then I think you'll probably do very well to be successful and not, deliver on any of those.
Yeah, of course. And you mentioned there about kind of absorbing information from people around you. I know in the sales team within the business is 12 people, isn't there?
Yep.
And your turnover north of 40 million, so you've got some top salespeople there for them to learn to. What are the traits you see from top billers within the business that people should try and replicate, or is it kind of a natural thing that these people have got that you can't maybe teach?
I think with top salespeople, there's always an element to that, but then it depends on where we're saying as top. You can be very, very good at your job, be a very, very good biller, and earn a very, very good salary, and put yourself top 5-10% of the country, without necessarily being what one would deem exceptional. I think at a basic level, hard work. For me, I don't think there's any substitute. As much talent as you've got, we can use the things like the kind of sort of football analogy here. You can be brilliant on a football pitch. If you're not prepared to run and move, then you probably won't ever get the ball. So your skills that you have, you're never actually going to be able to show anybody. And that's where every day you've just got to come in, be on it. If you're not feeling well, if you're not feeling great, personal things are going on in your life, whatever, just try and still put in as much effort as you can, because every day that goes by, every week that goes by, every month that goes by where you haven't put in hard work, that just makes things more and more difficult. And that's what I would say is underlying trait. And then the ability to listen. I think that is probably, I say as equal, but a huge part of the job, because it's information. You know, if looking at your role, you're looking to recruit someone for a business, it's like, well, what's the business really need? Where's the problems that you've had in recruitment? And if you're not absorbing any of that information, and then you go off and do exactly the things that have been the problem in the business to start off with, they're going to look at you and go, well, what's the point of using these guys? It's just a waste of time. And that's all because you just haven't, let's say, potentially asked the right questions, but the information that you've received, you haven't actually utilised and gone, okay, I can see this, I can see this, I can see this. This is how I'm going to make things better for that company.
Okay. And that's the two biggest traits you see in yourself and Dave and a few others obviously done really, really well.
Well, yeah, I mean, hard work is obviously a very generic term. I think going back to what I was saying about with regards to customers and committing to things, it's also making sure that you do deliver with what the customer is asking. I think there's a lot of times that people, and I'm not saying that people have to do emails or WhatsApp, Skype messages, etc. after hours, but I know from personal experience, by sending an email at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, has won me deals that are substantial, because that customer knows that I've got an active interest in them. They know that I'm paying attention to what they're asking. I'm coming back to them with information that they require, and it makes them feel comfortable in doing business with us. And I mean, we trade worldwide, a lot in the UK and Europe, so there is potentially a language barrier there where it's not always on the phone. So for a customer to send me an email and come back to them, you know, it makes them feel like, yeah, okay, this is not just doing a deal, it's not just money, you know, we are working together as a partnership. I think when you get that buying from a customer, from a sales perspective, it makes life, I'm not going to say easy, but
easier.
Yeah, because there's a belief on both sides, and so when you're working on a solution together. So why are they going to talk to another customer?
Yeah, of course. Okay. And you've obviously been with the business from, like you said, from 10th, 11th, 12th man on the floor to where you're at now with 60 people. That transition, what's that been like from, I imagine, being quite a small personal business to a corporate in some ways? I'm sure trying to maintain.
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. I mean, I think we've had ups and downs, probably like every business has had, because you constantly got to evolve, you constantly got to change, and no one really likes that. So that's probably been the most difficult thing in evolving from what is, you know, 10, 11 people to having to set up processes, having to do things that little bit higher, be a bit more efficient, etc., etc. And that's where perhaps you lose a little bit of the fun factor, but the kind of, and the sort of wheeling and dealing and that sort of thing. But, you know, the core essence is still there. I mean, Dave himself, the MD, you know, as much as he wants the business to keep growing and be as professional as it can be and keep evolving, you know, he's very much so, look, I want everyone to feel like they're important here and we're still a team. Difficulties, and as we've kind of sort of discussing before, is getting 60 people out to have a beer after work. Just the logistics of having a venue is hard enough, but it's still something we try and promote. And, you know, we're out this Friday as well with kind of month end, and, you know, that's something that, you know, Dave wants to maintain regardless. I mean, if we go up to 120, we might have to open our own pub maybe, I don't know, but
another arch.
Exactly.
And hiring is always going to be a difficulty for a business, purely because it's naturally one of the most difficult things to do when you're growing, but retention of staff is also very difficult, and I think it gets overlooked a lot of the time. Looking at your team, particularly the sales team or other parts, I think staff retention's been superb across the board. What would you put that down to? Is that down to kind of company culture and making people feel valued, or do you think there's other aspects that people ignore?
I think all of those. I think from a sales perspective, we're very fortunate that because Dave comes from a selling background, he very much wants. I mean, he wants to look after everyone in general, but from a sales perspective, he wants to look after his salespeople. So, if you are going that extra mile, you're putting a few extra pound notes into the account, etc., etc. You're going to get looked after. He'll. I know one of my colleagues got his Valentine's dinner paid for with his wife, because he was going above and beyond. And Dave wanted to say, look, go out with the missus, have a good time. That's on us. And I think that's where, I'm not saying it doesn't go on other businesses, but going back to what we were saying about going after the pub and things like that, it's that ethos of we are all in it together. We are all working hard to be better, and we're all rewarded. I mean, for me, I think a lot of the company benefits that you don't see are really good. Christmas dues, we'll always try and make it an experience for people. I mean, most recently we've been to things like the Oxford Blue, which is obviously one of the top 50 pubs, restaurants in the UK. We go to Ascot every year where we have our own tent, and that's all fully paid for, which is once again a fantastic experience.
Not cheap for 60 people either.
Well, no, 100%. It's not, and I think that's where a lot of people, especially who sit outside of sales, because that's kind of where the main hub does happen, with regards to the business development, etc. But for guys in the warehouse who perhaps slightly away from that, it's a fantastic day out for everybody as a company. In the last couple of years as well, we've gone to Portugal as a company for the weekend, as a thank you, where let's say we kept growing and we've hit our targets that we want to hit. And then from a sales perspective, we've had high flyers where last year it was Rio, we've been to Dubai, we've been to Vegas. There's been a lot of trips there which are all once again paid for and covered by the company. So in addition to financially being looked after, being valued as a member within the business, there's all these little extras which I think for some people perhaps even go unnoticed now, because it's just that's the way that we are. But for someone perhaps coming in, and I know other people who have joined most recently, it's been a bit like, wow.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're completely right. And I think everyone's quick towards the salespeople, but you're forgetting a lot of the other cogs in the machine. If they go unnoticed and you start to hemorrhage staff in those areas, it's going to affect sales, and maybe not everyone's so directly involved, but you shouldn't be forgetting about those people, because it takes a lot of cogs to make that machine, doesn't it, and build that business. I completely understand where you come from there. And you've obviously had huge success, and you've recorded some excellent growth, but there's also been some change in the business over the last 6 months or so that maybe surprised a lot of people, because some people might think the model's working, keep doing what you're doing, it'll keep growing, but you've had a bit of a rebrand and reshuffle of the business. Is it kind of differentiate and die for you, or what's your kind of thinking behind that?
I mean, the main aspect really is customer driven. Okay. And by that, it's just for us, we talked earlier in the conversation about how do you progress sales, how do you reevaluate, what do you do to kind of be better. And this is just part of that process from a company perspective. And we just looked at it and we said, right, well, we're doing fantastic in the kind of brokerage and kind of trade side. We also have a website which is corporate led. But it was more a functional part of the business as opposed to a complete service. And so we kind of looked at it and thought, well, look, this is something that we can do more. This is something that we can do a bit better than what we're doing. And we were still having fantastic success with it. But it was just, well, how would we make this better? What would it be? What do the customers want? And that's when we spoke to some of our customers. We got some feedback directly from them to understand some of the things that they felt that we could do better, how it would improve them as a business and make their life easier. And so creating a new website was the first real concept with that. And then it was like, well, if we're going to create a new website, do we stick with LA Micro as the name, or is kind of a rebranding the way forward? And whilst I wouldn't necessarily say we looked old, social media is such a massive thing now. You can be a hero yesterday, you're a villain tomorrow. And looking a bit more contemporary, being a bit more relevant to what the market is asking for, we just thought, look, a rebranding right now is going to be a really good time for us because there's a reason for it. There's a philosophy behind it. There's a process that we can utilise to drive the business forward. And Bytestock, which is the side that I head up, that was the reason that it all came around. And it's really just geared around the customer. The website is very functional. It's got a great search engine on it, so it makes life very easy for people to find parts or even system builds that they might be looking for just to check on price. And then we've added additional benefits, which, from a UK perspective, are pretty much unseen in the market as well.
Yeah, of course. And you touched on there the kind of brokerage and trade side of the business. I think there's probably still a lot of people in the IT channel that don't necessarily know what a trading brokerage is. Can you give a bit of a description of what you do that's different to what most channel businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of channel businesses will look at new product and potentially work through distribution or around distribution type products, which is fantastic. And the value add that they will be doing, maybe through software, through installation or something along those sort of lines, it'll work perfectly well for their business. Where we are slightly different is the kind of hardcore brokerage is obviously selling product. So it's taking a pallet here, moving a pallet there. But the real benefit that we can also offer, which is with LA Direct Solutions, is supporting the reseller market. And that's offering products which can be nearly new, refurbished, or even legacy product, because that's what the customer demands are or the customer constraints. I mean, ultimately, if a customer says, right, I would like to buy this server, what's the cost? And the reseller's there and they say, well, we've got to do our little bit, etc., but the hardware's going to cost you 10,000. Well, that's too much for my budget. What can we do? Now, if you're only going down distribution type model, you're pretty stuffed because you've got nowhere to maneuver. Whereas by speaking to, let's say, my colleagues on the LA Direct Solutions side, we can go through with you with what the customer's looking for and say, well, look, these are the options here. We can offer something that's perhaps the same or very similar at a reduced price because of the buying that we've got and the stock that we've held at a lower price point. Or we can go back perhaps even a generation to what would be your atypical perceived refurbished product, which could be something of 30% cheaper than what they're perhaps actually quoting at the moment, but still provide all the the customer requirements. So if you're a reseller and you said, well, actually, do you know what, let's go for this option, it's not exactly the same, but it's going to save you £5,000 and come within your budget, reseller's going to be happy because he's kept his customer's going to be happy because they've maintained their budget.
Yeah, of course. Why do you think it's got the reputation of being a little bit down and dirty, and refurb kit's got a bit of a thought in it that maybe isn't all positive? Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's like a lot of things. It's if you hear the word refurbished, straight away you're like, right, it's not brand new. Now, if I said to you, right, do you want a new phone? You go, oh yeah, I'd love a new phone. Okay, here's an iPhone 11, but it's been used. You'd be a bit like, great. It's not retail. It hasn't come in a little white box with my cellophane packaging and all that wonderful thing. But it's going to do exactly what you want it to do. It's going to match the exact specifications that you want. And also it's going to come with a warranty that is the same, if not better, in regards to length, than what you're going to receive anyway if you're buying new retail. So it's opening people's minds and educating them. And this is when, we talked about earlier about winning new business and how would you do that. It's one thing I sort of really want my guys to explain and say, well, look, new retail, perfectly fine. It's a great product. It's the latest technology. Brilliant. Is that what the customer really requires? Because a lot of the time they're buying something because it's new retail without actually understanding what they want. Right, I want a basic server, 32 gig of RAM, entry-level processor, one SSD because it's going to do something in the background for me. It doesn't need to work hard. Do you need to pay £3,000-4,000 for that when you could pay £1,000? Right. And if you've educated the customer and explained to them and said, well, look, yes, it's going to do exactly what you want it to do and you're going to save money, all of a sudden it gives the customer a lot more options. Oh, well, fantastic. Actually, do you know what? I kind of want to do a bit of a refresh on these laptops and these PCs as well. I had budgeted £4,000, but can we do the whole lot? How does that work? And it just gives people a lot more flexibility, and it just comes down to understanding. I mean, ultimately, we offer, our corporate customers 5-year warranty on our product. So if you're going new retail, typically it's going to be 3 years. So straight away, we're showing you there's a value into that product anyway.
Along with price.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think that market will develop more and we'll see more people moving into that market now, or do you think that the kind of newer kit's going to be the main focus? Is there room for both?
I suppose the issue is about the new kit, there isn't the refurbished kit. So I suppose there's always going to be a demand for the latest hardware, which I think is normally driven by software. So the likes of Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, Google, Amazon, all these companies, they're always going to push because the software that they're developing that is required for their product needs to be at the top end. This is why we have to keep upgrading our phones, because the operating system we've got now takes up X amount of room. It does this, it does that. So if you're using an iPhone 4, for example, effectively it won't work with the technology and the software you're trying to use today. So there's always going to be a room for new products, because that's what it is. But from a refurbished point of view, it's actually really good for the environment as well. So price point from a customer, fantastic. But utilising that rather than having e-waste, which is a really big thing in the industry right now, because a lot of people would discard, but the amount of consumption we have as an individual, let alone as a business, is very, very high. And we've kind of, I think in particular, last sort of 10 to 15 years, as a society, just gone, I'm going to consume something, I'm just going to throw it away without really thinking what happens there. So being able to recycle in a positive way, and still actually increase the life cycle of that product, it's great for the environment, it's great for the customer, and obviously yes, it's good for our business.
Yeah, of course. What's the biggest reservation that the LL Direct get from the partners on why they're not using more refurb kit? Is it issues with the vendors or their accreditations?
I think, different businesses are set up. Ultimately, refurbished kit isn't going to work for every single business and every single individual. So, if you are particularly aligned to a vendor, and there's rebates and things like that, there may be reasons why you can't. So that's then, as a business, you need to work out what you can or can't do. Putting that to one side, I think it just comes down to understanding. Most people will think of refurbished, and immediately I would say, when I'm maybe not so much now because I don't have these conversations anymore, when I used to, people would really think about refurbished cars, second-hand car. Oh, it's done all this miles. The thing is with a server, it sits in a cabinet and it doesn't move. So if you take things like, for example, hard drives out of it, which have obviously got moving parts and are likely to potentially fail at some point, the rest of it is just going to sit there in a cabinet, which if it's in a DC, for example, it's going to be in a perfect environment for it because it's been kept cool at the right temperature, etc. So the chances of that failing imminently are quite small. Even the chances of it failing over a 2, 3, 4, 5 year period are also quite small. And that's not to say that it won't fail, but there's been plenty of times when I've sent out new servers, and I always remember one time when I first started, I sent out a brand new drive and it arrived DOA. So go figure that one.
Yeah, it sounds great. Obviously, the resellers can make good margins on it. The price will be good for the customers, and it's good for the environment. So it sounds like win-win for me. But
exactly.
Yeah, I can see why people might have the constraints on it and whatever else. Okay, and is there anything you're really particularly excited about that's happening at the Micro Group or Bytestock in particular that you'd like to share?
Lots, probably. No, I think for us as a business, it's exciting times. We've got a telephone side-to-side business as well, so that's coming along, and that's great. So from a new business point of view, it's brilliant because there's so much more to talk about than what we ever had before. We stock a lot more than what we ever had. So as a business and growth perspective, the opportunities are fantastic. I guess the downside will probably be how Brexit kind of does pan itself out with our European customers. But no, we launched the website back in September. We're seeing growth every month on that, so that's good. I'm working hard with our marketing team to assist them wherever I can, to kind of do as many great and wonderful things for the kind of brand exposure, and they're being fantastic. So it's really good. It's good for me to listen to new people and listen to different ways as well, because having done sales and my own marketing, I've got my way of doing things which I believe is right, but to kind of be educated and hear a different opinion, That's fantastic. So they've been a bit of a revelation for the business as well. And so, yeah, I mean, for us, it's just great. We're coming up to our year end. So it's a big push at the moment. And then, hopefully get myself on the high flyers for next year as well.
Happy days. I say that your new head of marketing's done an excellent job, so the content he's putting out is brilliant. I think a lot of business should be looking at that and trying to replicate it. So the final question before we end the podcast, who are the 2 people you'd like to see on Channel Chat?
I don't know whether I throw you under a bus or not. I don't know. I think name-wise, I'm not sure. I mean, I think, I haven't watched obviously every single podcast. As I said, as great as they are a little bit longer at sometimes to be able to kind of fit it into my day. Yeah. But no, I think perhaps listening to a few people who I say are outside the channel, but work within the channel, but do perhaps a different service and things like that, and kind of get, for me, I say, educate myself, get a different perspective on how other people see things, because I think, we touched on it before with the vendors and side of things and the people working with distribution, and that atypical IT sort of channel person is someone a bit outside of that, perhaps a little bit like us, and listening to kind of their experiences and how they built their business up, the good things, the bad things, how they see the future going, and just listening to someone's different opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. So I think you can get stuck in a way of thinking and assume it's right because it's what everyone else is doing. But if you can differentiate yourself from other businesses, it's going to put you in a great spot. But Mark, really appreciate your time. You've been a brilliant guest, and really appreciate your time.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us and listening to another episode of our Channel Chat podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard and are listening on iTunes, please could you give us a review and subscribe in order to get the newest episodes as soon as they're released. Otherwise, as always, we release an episode every Thursday at midday, so hopefully you can join us then.